Hi everyone, it's Friday, and that means it's time for the Friday interview. This week I'll be talking to Professor Elemental about his album, The School of Whimsy, the accompanying tour, talking about his life, some interesting stories, anecdotes. So let's get right into it. So you created the character of the Professor 11 years ago now. So how have the years been treating you since then?
Very well, better than it has any right to do so, really, considering it was only like a little one-off joke. Like I had a proper career as a teacher, and my spare time did like UK hip hop that no one wanted to hear. And now I started doing this weird stuff. Now UK hip hop's really popular. It wasn't when I was doing it. Maybe it wasn't popular because of me doing it. I'm not sure. So yes, it's treating me well. I managed to make a living out of doing this silliness, and it's all very nice.
That's good. So I believe your first album as the Professor was in 2008 with Rebel Without Applause.
Yeah, that was the first one he turned up on. Good research.
You did that with Tom Caruana, didn't you? So how did you sort of meet and how did you work together?
In perfect fashion for the two of us, we met because he fell over me at Glastonbury when he was lost, like well over 10 years ago. And I was sitting around a campfire and I was going to try and do some rapping, and he fell over. And then he was lost, so I just said, sit down here. And then he did some beatbox. I did some rapping. He just started producing. I just started rapping. And it was a match made in heaven. And then the professor just came out of doing lots of evenings around his house, watching old Vivian Stanshall documentaries and eating mushrooms on toast and climbing trees and just talking in a silly voice that eventually developed into my whole world, where I'm not sure really where the professor ends and where I begin.
Fantastic. So do you see your sort of collaboration together as sort of intrinsic to the Professor, or is it more sort of you and he sort of supports from the side as the producer?
Yeah, he's nothing really without me. It's all about me. It's not about his music, his beautiful music underlying everything. Nothing to do with that. It's all about me and my talking. That's what makes it good. No, it's absolutely. Without Tom Caruana, I'd be ruined. I'd be nothing. I'd be destroyed. I'd like, yeah, he's essential basically, because his not only does his music sort of underpin all the Professor stuff, but often it's his music that gives me the ideas first and foremost. He'll send me something, and I'll go, oh, that sounds like swimming with otters or eating candy floss on a unicorn, and that's where a lot of the Professor ideas come from. So it's very much a 50-50 partnership. Yeah, definitely.
So Fighting Trousers was probably the track that sort of launched your career. It's certainly where I first sort of came across you on YouTube. So how did the idea, because obviously it's a diss track on Mr. B the Gentleman Rhymer. So how did that sort of, where did that come from?
I just wanted to have a fight with him because we're both we like two. There's only two of us doing. There's a whole genre with just two people in it, and we started it independently in the same town at exactly the same time without knowing each other at all. So I thought he was sort of biting on my style, and he wasn't at all. He'd come up with his own ideas. Um, and so, yeah, encouraged by hip hop friends, decided to do a diss that was a genuine diss, but also a bit of a parody of diss records that I'd heard previously. And as I've said many times in interviews, then turned out he was really nice. And I was forced to apologise to his face. But he's lovely. And now we're friends, so that's all fine.
Yes, because I believe when I was doing research, I saw on your Instagram you went on a road trip with him. I saw you had a few photos with him. How did that come about?
It was amazing. Well, we hang out together anyway, but we were both going to the same gig in Exeter, the Steampunk Yule Ball, which happens every year and is amazing. So he said he was driving down. I thought, oh, that'd be quite nice. He can drive me around, well, particularly driving back hungover the next day. I thought that'd be lovely. And we quickly developed into a sort of father and a sort of wayward son, with me doing sing-alongs and pestering him and trying to change the music channel, and him desperately just trying to drive us to our destination safely. And it was good. I had a nice time. Don't know if he did. Don't care. We had a great time.
So where do you sort of start out with when you're coming up with an album?
Um, the nice thing is that they just sort of smack you in the face. Usually, it's that I always there's always a thing when I'm working on an album, like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen to the album after next. Maybe I'll have run out of stuff by then. But something will always like it hit me just dramatically. There'll always be something that makes me go, oh yeah, we've never done that with him. And but I think because I'm a nerd as well, reading like endless comic books and graphic novels and fantasy series and cartoons, all those things are so imaginative and they're constantly pumping your brain full of new imaginative ideas and stories. It doesn't take much for those to give you at least a little bit of inspiration. Like a lot of the early Professor stuff, was directly influenced by sort of Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore stuff that I took and went on my own twist of. And latterly Grant Morrison as well influences a lot of bits and pieces of mine. So yeah, a lot of different influences, but they just kind of smack you in the face and go, oh, this is the next thing, and I go, oh, okay, that's what I'll carry on doing then.
So I think probably one of my favourite albums personally of yours is probably 8 Quest, which you did in 2015, because I really just it's like just a small radio play, but told in fully in rap. Where did that sort of originate from? Where did the little kernel of an idea from?
Yeah, I'm glad you'd say like that one because that was my favourite to do, and it was I like the idea of doing something that felt like a radio play or like a sort of live comic or something. It came from that was good actually because it was the first idea for the Professor came from Tom Caruana, and he was working with loads of amazing rappers. And he was going to do an album where each rapper represented a different period of time. So one would be the big dawn of time, and one would be war or whatever, and I was going to be Victorian. And I was the only one that bothered to do mine because all rappers are lazy. So that was where the very first Professor song came from. But I thought the idea was a really good one. So particularly with the Professor being a man professor, traveling through time seemed to fit it really nicely. Doing lots of songs in different time periods is a great excuse to collaborate with different people. And once I'd lost my monkey, it all seemed to tie in together really nicely. But yeah, the next album that we're going to do, or sort of the album after next, is going to be similarly a big concept thing. And I want to try and make it like a big comic book event. I don't know if you read comics, but like your Infinity Gauntlet type things where the hero is just really battered and has a really tricky time. I want something proper to challenge the Professor for a change because he has it far too easy, I think.
So do you sort of have a long-term plan for your albums then, or do you sort of take it as it comes?
Oh, as it's kind of like as the years have gone on, I've got more into planning. I always plan the year ahead and have a vague idea about the year after, and just have faith that beyond that it will probably be fine. There's no point in having ideas beyond that because by the time you arrive at them, they'll be totally stale and boring. They have to stay relatively fresh and new. So there's always like at the beginning of every year, you can see this on Instagram, people. It's a really good way to do it if you're a creative person. I make a big mind map with everything on that I've got planned to do, and all around the edges of the actual objectives, and leading up to them, little speech bubbles about how to achieve all those objectives. And from a creative point of view, it's a very simple thing that lots of people use, but I really recommend it. It really helps focus at the beginning of the year.
So when you sort of perform live, what's your sort of, do you have a backstage routine? Do you have any sort of rituals or anything you do, or?
Many rituals. I do lots of voice exercises and squat thrusts, and then some jumping jacks. No, I don't have a pint. That's what I do. Have a pint, talk to people, and wait for someone to say on stage, "Now, Professor Elemental," and then I normally go, "Oh Christ," and then run out and say, yeah, just shit. But what I always do is I do have a real routine on the way to the gig. I try. It doesn't like 9 times out of 10. I write new material to say in between all of the songs, like new stand-up material, stuff about whatever's going on around me at the time, and things specific to the gig. Because I want to keep a little bit nervous and a little bit fresh every time I do a show. So I like having some new stuff that's going to make me a bit nervous for every gig. And also, if people have seen me before, then guarantees they wouldn't have seen the same thing twice exactly. So that normally works. But as you can imagine, doing new material every single show means some of it is shit. And for every time I've gone, bam, wrote that in the car, I smashed it with that little line. There's been times I thought that was a mistake. Why did I say those things out loud?
So would you, because obviously your first love is hip hop and rap. Would you say as the Professor, you're more of a rapper or more of a sort of a comedian, more of a comedy character, or is it sort of a match of the two?
It's probably mashed. It's as mashed together as me being sort of the professor now, really. Like, yeah, mostly a rapper. Like, I like to arrive and like properly rock a party, but I always have aspirations of doing stand up and really enjoy like the fact that I've got a bit of a platform to stand on. So if I want to talk about mental health or libraries or whatever else is going on in my brain, then I can just have a bit of a go at that as well. What I have tried to learn is not to rant endlessly about, I don't know, Brexit or something, because no one wants that on a night out. If I'm going to say something, try and make sure that it's got some merit as being a joke rather than just me shouting at people, which I have done.
Because that's an interesting thing that I really like about the character of the professor is that it's sort of very quintessentially British. I mean, obviously there's an entire track called "I'm British," which is one of my probably one of my favorite rap tracks ever, if I'm honest. And obviously, interestingly, with the sort of the current political climate, as it were, where do you sort of see the professor? Like, what do you think the professor would make of like Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, as a character?
Well, I got in trouble at a gig for making jokes about shooting him with a blunderbuss last year. I mean, I meant it very lightly, but I'm still fair enough. That probably was a bit out of order. Yeah, no, I really hate the Tories. Absolutely hate them, and feel like the things that they've done to this country have ruined it for decades to come. Um, and also, I'm playing a very posh. I'm in a weird position because I'm playing a posh colonial professor doing, what is still essentially black urban music, although white people like me have been ruining it for ages. And so you're kind of caught very much in the middle. And I think it makes me really keen to sort of lay my cards on the table politically to make sure the wrong kind of people don't like me. I don't want to end up with the wrong sort of fans. And also, it needs to be very clear that what this is a parody of as well. So yeah, and finally, being a comic character does give you license to say things that you wouldn't otherwise get away with as well. I think that's quite nice. That could be quite fun.
Because interesting in I'm British, there's a line where you say we're very very sorry about Piers Morgan. So what do you think of the whole Piers Morgan vegan sausage roll scandal?
He's just the worst person. I don't even want to really talk about him because everybody who talks about him or retweets about how awful he is all adds fuel to the fire. It's all he cares about, and it's all any of those people care about. They don't care whether you say that you hate them or not. They just want more attention. And I would say that on Twitter, there's one thing that I love Twitter, but I get very annoyed when people sort of retweet things to say, look at how awful this thing is that I really disagree with. Don't do that, people. That's an awful thing to do because it's all adding fuel to the fire. Like, spend more time finding things that you like and saying, man, I just read this book or I just checked out this band. They're all really good. I think that sort of negative retweeting to show what we should all not like this thing. That's where a lot of social media goes horribly wrong. That awful pile on. And also you sometimes, not with someone like awful like Piers Morgan, but sometimes people pile on and they don't necessarily know the whole story. And you can I've done it myself. You can have a go at somebody and then later find out that actually you chose the target wrong or it's been reported slightly oddly. So lots of these kind of public shamings don't do anybody any good. That's what I think.
Fair enough. Interesting. How do you sort of consume your music? Do you prefer sort of CD, DVD, vinyl?
I just it just loads. I'm more of a quantity over quality. Like I just have a huge, mostly MP3s. I've got an old school iPod as well because I refuse to get Spotify. That's the point when I noticed that I was getting properly middle-aged actually, when I started raging at things that I no longer either understood or had control over. Like I'm not renting out my music to other people. I'm owning my music on this old school device. There's a lot of that sort of stuff for me. So yeah, lots of MP3s just in a great big pile. And I like a lot of really odd music as well. So there's a lot of all the stuff I like isn't pretty much on Spotify because it's too weird.
Oh right. So you don't use Spotify at all then?
I mean, I've still got all my music up there because these days it would be a bit foolish to not have your stuff up there. But yeah, I make the odd playlist and stuff. But I'm much happier. I like giving people music as well. Like on my Patreon, one of the things I do every month is to give people a little compilation of music, and rather than just linking to a playlist, I like actually saying, look, you can download all of this stuff, this weird music from my collection. That's more, I don't know, it's more of a nice way to share music, I think.
So your latest album, The School of Whimsy, sort of can you tell us a little bit about it, where it's come from?
It was kind of quite a loose topic for an album, but one of the songs I did a while ago called All In Together was kind of about a little bit about mental health and also about being appreciating your weirdness and being confident enough to be different from everybody else. And that really seemed to resonate with people. People like that as a message, and inevitably my fans are like me and they're quite nerdy. Um, and us nerds, we tend to sit on the outside of social circles and little subcultures and not quite understand how everybody else is doing it. We feel quite excluded sometimes. So I wanted to do an album that concentrated on all of the stuff that we go through, particularly people, I don't know, speaking as people like me, you might get nervous or have panic attacks or need to find the optimistic side of life when everything seems quite dour and dark. And I wanted to just make some sunny, silly music because there's just a lot of bad, dark stuff going on, isn't there? So I feel like it's your duty to spread a little bit of sunshine if you can.
I notice you've got a lot of collaborations on a lot of your albums, but particularly on the School of Whimsy, I found. Um, do you like collaborating with people? Is that sort of a thing that you particularly enjoy doing?
Oh,
Hmm. What do you make of the sort of the recent Eminem and Machine Gun Kelly sort of battle fight thing? Like, what do sort of from your perspective?
it was all right, wasn't it? I thought it was quite good. I thought it was quite decent. I don't really know Machine Gun Kelly because I'm old and he's none of my business. He does music that I'm not concerned with. But I thought he had some good bars. Eminem had some good bars. It's that sort of thing that was kind of good to listen to. Like a lot of Eminem's music, like it's impressive to listen to. Oh, that's very clever. It's very clever how he did that. But I don't really want to hear it again. I don't want to hear it more than once. A lot of the time, I find it's a bit too like I don't know, machine gun fire. So yeah, it was good. It was a good little battle, and I like a little battle as long. And they seem to keep it kind of friendly. I thought Eminem, if anything, at the end of that, he sort of did a little half apology at the end of this really fiery verse. Went, "Oh, sorry, Puff Daddy, I'm good friends with you. I didn't mean to have a go at you. We're friends, aren't we?" Like, Eminem, don't ruin it. That's like
It's
me saying I'm friends with Mr. B at the end of my thing. Like, don't be all nice at the end, crikey.
indeed. So, sort of, what do you think of sort of the wider hip hop culture, sort of, particularly sort of UK compared to US? Sort of, where do you sort of stand on it? Because obviously you're sort of, as you say, you're a bit more old school, as it were.
Yeah, I love it. I love it all. I think there's huge differences in America and England. I've noticed it when I'm in the States as well, in that it's a lot more. America's very different in terms of race as well. Not saying one's necessarily better than the other, but there's definitely more divisions in America that are much more clearly cut. And I think hip hop is sometimes still seen much more as black music over there, whereas over here it always has been, as far as hip hop's concerned, although it's originated from black music, it's always been much more of a melting pot. As long as there's been hip hop over here, there's been all kinds, every race has been involved. And yeah, culturally, I think it's amazing. It's amazing the way that it brings people together who would never ever hang out as well. When I used to do a lot more workshops, it was just phenomenal that you'd have teenagers from every conceivable background, struggling and troubled to incredibly privileged, and there's a real level playing field when it comes to hip hop, and everybody can get on and merge in together. And I've seen it do some pretty incredible things, whether it's catapulting people to fame or helping them find a living or just a way to express mental health issues, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, hip hop it's a phenomenal force for good, and it's quite nice to see it doing so well as well. It's nice to see that it's kind of for years there was always articles about like UK hip hop's going to make the mainstream and it never did. And now it kind of is all over the place. So that I think that's quite nice. So yeah, it's in a good place at the moment. I think rap music's nice.
So, what would you say if like Kanye West phoned you up tomorrow and asked you to collaborate on an album with him?
Can you imagine? It would be awful, wouldn't it? It would just be the most shitty music. Me really distorted over a horrible Kanye West beat. I mean, there was a time he was my favorite producer. He was amazing. That he just went. He'd like a lot of a lot of Americans. They get loads of money and then they go mad and then they're rubbish. Like it just awful with all the Trump stuff. I'd struggle, I think, because I would quite like the money, but I don't think I'd like to make the really shitty music that would be required to do it. So, Kanye, if you're watching this, I'm really sorry to have to turn you down. But if you do have DJ Premier's number, get him to give me a tinkle.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me. I think that's everything that I've got.
Well, that's bloody lovely. Thanks ever so much for having me. And thank you for letting me ramble at your face.
No problem.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, chum. Bye.